Revolution, a real chance to win. By Bob Avakian. Introduction. Some people have argued that an attempt to make an actual revolution, to overthrow the ruling system of capitalism, imperialism in this country, up against the powerful armed forces of this system, would be suicidal. This is something I spoke to a number of years ago now in the talk, Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Can Really Make Revolution. Many people, including many who say that they would like to see a radical change in society, insist that revolution is not possible because they are too powerful and people are too messed up. Well, it is true that, shaped as they are by this system, the masses of people in any part of society don't know shit and have their heads up their asses when it comes to an understanding of how things really are, why they are the way they are, and what could and should be done about this. But this stands in sharp contradiction to another important truth, that millions of people really do care about one or more, and many care about all, of the 5 stops. This is a contradiction that we have to go to work on, to move masses of people in the direction of the revolution that is needed to finally put a stop to those 5 stops and the horrific conditions to which the masses of humanity are constantly subjected. The 5 stops refers to 5 major social contradictions and forms of oppression and devastation that are built into the system of capitalism, imperialism, and which can only be eliminated through a revolution to overthrow this system. It is also true that the ruling powers of this system, with the machinery of death and destruction they wield to enforce this system, are indeed very powerful. But a big part of people's difficulty in imagining that we could actually defeat them is the inability to conceive of a situation that is radically different than the normal functioning of this system. A situation where, for large parts of society, the hold of the ruling class over people, its ability to control, manipulate, and intimidate them, is broken or greatly weakened. Fundamentally, people cannot imagine this because they are not approaching things with a scientific outlook and method. This series of 5 articles speaks more fully to why such a revolution is not only urgently necessary now, but why, with the right scientific approach, such a revolution could in fact have a real chance to succeed, and why anyone who really wants to see a radically different world without all the horrors that are continually brought about and the even greater horrors for humanity that are now threatened by this system of capitalism, imperialism, needs to be actively involved in working tirelessly with scientifically based determination for this revolution.
Today, we're going to play a significant section from the second part of this series titled Revolution, A Real Chance to Win, Part 2, A Scientifically Based Strategy. This is drawn from Bob Avakian's talk, Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Can Really Make Revolution, which is a critically important film for everyone whose eyes are open to the idea and the possibility of revolution, and even more. As Bob Avakian writes in the introduction to this series, which Noche just read, this is for, quote, anyone who really wants to see a radically different world, without all the horrors that are continually brought about, and the even greater horrors for humanity that are now threatened by this system of capitalism, imperialism. Everyone who feels this way needs to be actively involved in working tirelessly with a scientifically based determination for this revolution. Bob Avakian introduces this second installment with these words, quote, the following excerpt from Why We Need an Actual Revolution and How We Can Really Make Revolution is the second in this series of selections from my talks and writings, speaking to how to go about carrying out a revolution in this country, mobilizing millions of people with the goal of actually defeating the violent enforcers of this system of capitalism, imperialism, abolishing this system altogether, and bringing into being a radically different, emancipating system based on the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America.
Let's begin with a statement from How We Can Win that everything we are doing is aiming for something very definite, a revolutionary situation, where the system and its ruling powers are in a serious crisis, and millions of people refuse to be ruled in the old way and are willing and determined to put everything on the line to bring down this system and bring into being a new society and government that will be based on the Constitution for the new socialist republic in North America. That is the time to go all out to win. That is what we need to be actively working for and preparing for now. Key components and signs of a revolutionary crisis are that the violence used to enforce this system is seen by large parts of society for what it is, murderous and illegitimate, and that the conflicts among the ruling forces become really deep and sharp, and masses of people respond to this not by falling in behind one side or the other of the oppressive rulers, but by taking advantage of this situation to build up the forces for revolution. This underlines the great importance of ongoing work and compelling struggle to break people away from the hold of the political operatives and media mouthpieces of this system. I will speak more fully to how we need to be actively preparing now for a revolutionary situation. But first, in order to have the fullest sense of this, we need to work back from that situation and what would be required then, how the all-out fight would need to be waged to have a real chance to defeat the powerful, violent forces of this system. Here again, it is crucially important to approach things in a serious and scientific way. A big problem for the revolution is what could be called the encirclement and suppression of the people at the base of society who are subjected to one injury and insult after another under this system, and who yearn for an end to all this madness, but who are, in a certain sense, surrounded in the society at large by sections of people who do not directly suffer the same daily outrages. To put it simply, there are large numbers of poor and bitterly oppressed people in this country, but there is also a big middle class. Although much of this middle class is not doing as well economically as in the past, there is still a big gap between the middle class and the people at the base of society. And this big divide is one of the main reasons why people, even people who say they would like to see a revolution, but who just look at things on the surface and do not analyze the situation scientifically, say that revolution is not possible. And it is something that the ruling class and its institutions of repression and control have seized on in their efforts to isolate and contain, as brutally as they deem necessary, those whom they most viciously oppress and who represent potentially the greatest threat to their system. This is something these ruling powers would seek to do in an even more systematic and greatly intensified way in a situation where they were confronted by an organized revolutionary struggle aimed at overthrowing their whole system. It is one of the main obstacles the revolutionary forces would need to overcome in order to have a real chance of winning. Not only the strategic approach and basic operational principles, but also certain particular tactical measures of the revolutionary forces, including concentrating forces to repeatedly break through and break down the other side's physical encirclement of areas of revolutionary strength would need to be developed and applied to address this major contradiction once the all-out struggle were underway. But confronting this basic problem cannot be left until the time when the all-out struggle is raging. This is something I spoke to in very plain and stark terms in the New Communism, where I emphasized that we need to transform this situation so that when the time comes, it's not going to be the case that they can easily contain this revolution to those sections of the people that they just as soon kill off anyway. And as is also emphasized in On the Possibility of Revolution, political and ideological work with this contradiction in mind would need to be carried out during the whole period before the emergence of the necessary conditions and the all-out struggle is launched. The more this work is carried out from here forward, the more the revolutionary forces would be able to counter and defeat the military encirclement and suppression of the strongholds of the revolution when the time came for the all-out fight.
From here, Bob Avakian goes deep into a path-breaking analysis that develops and breaks down strategic principles which could be applied in the actual revolutionary struggle to, as the proclamation We Are the Revcom says, quote, finally defeat the violent enforcers of this monstrous system, end quote. This is a huge contribution to making a real revolution with the potential to win, lifting a huge weight off the masses of exploited and oppressed people here and all over the world. While we don't have time to play all of this on today's RNL show, Part 2 of Revolution, A Real Chance to Win is a must-read and a must-watch, and it really deserves your study. My God, this is about how we could really win. Bob Avakian goes on from where we left off into how the revolution could deal with this real problem. A defining contradiction of this all-out fight is the fact that at the start, the other side, quote, would likely still be very powerful in military terms, although weak and in crisis politically, end quote. While the revolutionary side, quote, would be weak at the beginning in military terms, but strong and on the rise and have a great deal of initiative politically, which would then have to be transformed into initiative militarily, end quote. Let me underscore this because it's the framework for what follows. At the start of the revolutionary struggle, the military ability and capacity of the revolution would be weak and the other side would be strong, while politically the forces of the old order would be in crisis and weak, with the revolutionary forces and the revolution strong politically and on the rise, with initiative that, as B.A. said, would have to become strong militarily. Bob Avakian then speaks to decisive questions and matters in really making a revolution. Let's start. How could the revolutionary force avoid being defeated at the beginning when they are weaker, yet able to advance in their fighting strength and capacity? How could the revolutionary forces demoralize and disintegrate the counter-revolutionary forces and their civilian base of support? Why would a real revolution involve a civil war between two sections of the people? How could backbone forces of the youth, who through the course of this period become committed to the revolution, be transformed into organized fighting forces? And how could their training be carried out and the necessary equipment be provided for? How could all the logistical needs of a fighting force be provided for? What would be the decisive role of the masses who support and sustain the revolution be? How would every aspect of an actual revolution be, as Bob Avakian says, quote, in line with the emancipating outlook and goals of the revolution, end quote? And why is that essential as part of the revolutionary military strategy? How could the revolutionary forces fight only on favorable terms and avoid decisive encounters, which would determine the outcome of the whole thing, until the balance of forces had shifted overwhelmingly in favor of the revolution and the revolutionary forces. How would the revolution deal with holding on to territory? Why should the revolutionary forces not attempt to openly control and govern territory until the necessary favorable balance of forces has been created? And what is the relationship between the revolution here and the countries to the south and north of America? How could the immoral brutality of the forces that rule this country, with their massive destructive means, which they wouldn't hesitate to viciously use with their future at stake, be turned against them by the morality and the goals and the conduct of the revolutionary forces? How could the revolutionary forces counter the decapitation strategy of the enemy? And why and how is what we do today in building the movement for revolution of tremendous importance in addressing this problem? And last, there is a critically important discussion of the differences and the similarities between the road to revolution here in this advanced country and in countries of the third world, which leads Bob Avakian to get into our strategic orientation of hastening while awaiting the time when the all-out struggle could actually be launched. But before going back to the film, I want to say this. My outline of the path-breaking substance of what we are not showing today in the questions I just asked should be a provocation for you to go and dig into the whole of this important work for yourself. And in how people discuss this presentation on today's RNL show, or after reading part 2 of Revolution, A Real Chance to Win, or watching the film of why we need an actual revolution and how we can really make revolution. In discussing all this, it is very important to pay attention to how Bob Avakian does and does not talk about the strategy for making a revolution. It matters for each of us to understand that strategy accurately. Pay attention to the precision he uses, which I have also applied today. Precision precisely because revolution is not a game and we can't let people twist our words. Now, in the next section of part 2 of Revolution, A Real Chance to Win, Bob Avakian speaks to what we need to do now to prepare for the time when we can go all out to make an actual revolution.
Everything we are doing at all times is part of making revolution. Actively working according to a strategic approach and plan to move things as fast as possible toward the time when it will be possible for millions to fight all out with a real chance to win. So with this understanding and orientation, how do we go about hastening while awaiting? The means for doing this is concentrated in the formulation, fight the power and transform the people for revolution. Let's start with the aim of all this, revolution. In Basics 3.1, I put it like this. Let's get down to basics. We need a revolution. Anything else in a final analysis is bullshit. That is another simple and basic truth. We need to go to people, not just one or two people, not just a small number of people, but masses of people, reaching all over the country and every part of society, straight up with revolution. Instead of just letting where they are at set the terms and trying to somehow bring in some idea about revolution within that limited framework. As Basics 3.1 goes on to say, we do need to unite with people in all sorts of struggles short of revolution. But it is frankly ridiculous to think that something short of revolution could solve all the monumental problems and monstrous outrages that people face under this system. On the basis of going to people straight up with revolution, then, coming from that place, we need to unite with people in fighting injustice and oppression and struggle to win more and more people to see the need and the possibility for revolution and to get with this. This goes back to the important contradiction that millions and millions of people really do care about one or more, and many care about all of those 5 stops. But in terms of understanding where all these outrages come from and what is necessary to really put a stop to them, most of the same people don't know shit and have their heads up their asses. So, while uniting with and working to bring forward still greater numbers of people in protesting and resisting the atrocities of this system, there is a need for sharp struggle to win them to confront and grasp the fact that in fundamental terms, this system is the source of all these horrors, and it cannot be reformed but must be overthrown. This is revolutionary work that must be carried out by continually growing numbers of people, organized into the ranks of the revolution and acting together in accordance with a common strategic orientation and plan. This must be done consistently, including in more normal times, whatever those are. And it is of heightened importance with every jolt in society, every crisis, every new outrage, where many people question and resist what they normally accept. How we can win emphasizes that the organized forces and the leadership of this revolution must become the authority that growing numbers of people look to and follow, not the lying politicians and media of this oppressive system, not those who front for the oppressors and preach about reconciliation with this system, not those who turn people against each other when they need to be uniting for this revolution. Revolution is possible, and we have to go to work to make it real. So let me end with what is powerfully stated in the conclusion of how we can win. All this depends on winning millions to revolution in the period that leads up to the ripening of a revolutionary situation. The chance to defeat them when the time comes. The chance to be rid of this system and bring something far better into being has everything to do with what we do now. Everyone who hungers for a radically different world, free of exploitation and oppression and all the needless suffering caused by this system, needs to work now with a fire determination to make this happen, so we will have a real chance to win.